The floorboards were cold and mean against Clara's cheek. Splinters chewed at her torn dress as she lay exactly where she'd hit the ground. Every breath was thin and sharp, like swallowing glass that wouldn't quit. The ache in her side had sunk deeper now, a grinding pull that warned of bones bent wrong. "My ribs are already broken," she whispered to the empty air. The words barely stirred, the dust motes dancing in a hard shaft of afternoon light that slid through the cabin's one small window. Outside, boots thudded across the porch. Jeremiah's boots, the heavy tread that once meant safety when she was little. Before drink gripped him and would not let go. Before their pa died and left them nothing but a patch of stingy earth, and Jeremiah's temper growing like a brush fire no one could put out. The boots stopped. Clara held the breath she could, counting heartbeats 1, 2, 3. Sometimes he forgot. Sometimes the heat drained from him like a fever breaking, and he'd come back in with that old face, sorry and confused, offering water while she stitched up whatever had torn. Not today. The silence stretched too long, stretched until it snapped. She knew he was standing there, working himself up into something worse. The door scraped open. Clara kept her face down. She'd learned long ago that looking at him when he was like this only poured oil on the fire. Better to be still. Smaller. Let the storm blow over. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." She hadn't heard him come that close. The words hit her like cold water. She'd been drifting pain, pulling her toward that gray edge where nothing felt real. I said, "Look at me, Clara." Boot leather came into view, scarred, stained dark. Then his hands, knuckles raw from whatever he'd taken them to before he came for her. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Pale blue, like their mother's but worn flat and strange. "You think you're too good for the work I give you?" His voice was quiet. That was worse than shouting. Quiet meant the anger had turned to ice. "Better than this place. Better than me." Clara wanted to say it wasn't true. She'd scrubbed floors, mended clothes, cooked what little there was. She'd asked for nothing, which was almost nothing anyway. But the words never came when he was like this. "Pa always said you had too much of Ma in you," he went on, circling her slow, like she was a calf he meant to brand. "Said it'd make you soft." Guess he was right. The mention of their parents twisted something inside her that wasn't bone. Pa had been hard but fair. Ma had been gentle to the last. Neither would have known the man Jeremiah had turned into. "Get up," Clara tried. She pressed torn palms to rough boards and pushed, and a white flare tore through her side. She dropped with a breath that sounded like a sob. I said, "Get up." His boot clipped her shoulder, not enough to break more. Just enough to send her sliding until her back hit the logs. She curled there, and something precious inside her gave way, not ribs, deeper. It was the last little piece that believed if she endured long enough, things might change. That small, stubborn part died quiet on the cabin floor. In its place came an emptiness, not peace, but a hollow calm that almost felt like relief. "You can't even do that right," he muttered, disgusted, like she was a blown horse fit for the knacker. "Can't do nothing right." He's right, slipped through her mind. Couldn't please him. Couldn't stop the pain. Couldn't even die proper, when that might have been a mercy for them both. The light shifted, throwing a new rectangle across the opposite wall. Afternoon wore thin. Soon the dark would come. Jeremiah would drink himself under. There'd be a few hours of quiet, then morning, then the dance again. But there, hunched at the wall, something whispered in her broken chest. Not words. A feeling. A notion of somewhere beyond these walls. Beyond the loop of hurt and hollow forgiveness. Maybe there were people who didn't use their hands for hurting. Places where breathing didn't charge a toll. The thought felt dangerous, foreign. She shoved it away. But it left a seed behind. A tiny seed hope in poisoned ground. She closed her eyes and let the whisper fade. She didn't forget it. Couldn't. Not even when Jeremiah turned away and left her there like dropped laundry. Night came. The cabin sank into its familiar dark. "My ribs are already broken," she said again, and the words shifted, faintly. Not only fact. A strange, stubborn truth. A person could be broken and still be breathing. Outside, a lone nightbird called across the miles. Clara listened until sleep took her. pressed to the wall, whispering promises she wasn't ready to believe. Dawn crawled in gray and bitter through the single window. She woke, curled where sleep had found her. Her body was stiff. Her ribs screamed with each shallow breath, but something else had hardened too. Resolve, thin as spun glass, sharp enough to cut. From the back room came Jeremiah's snoring, thick with whiskey. He always slept heavy after a bad night, like the violence had spent him, same as it spent her. She eased off the wall, swallowing the sounds of pain. Each movement was a small agony. She put bare feet to the one floorboard that never creaked the path she'd mapped on endless nights, fetching water, tending coals, trying not to wake him. The door stood between her and everything beyond. She'd looked at it 1,000 times, never like this. Not as a way through and gone. Her fingers closed on the iron latch, winter cold against her palm, and she froze, listening to his breathing. If he woke now, if he found her with a hand on the door like a wild thing about to bolt. The snoring held steady. She lifted the latch with the slow care of someone diffusing dynamite. Morning air slapped her cheeks sharp, cool, promising heat later. She'd forgotten how big the sky could be when no walls tried to crush it smaller. For a breathless second, the open world tilted. She had to grip the doorframe to keep from falling. The porch boards were rough, underfoot, weathered smooth here, splintered there, a map of hard years. She'd swept those boards just yesterday, back when yesterday felt like it belonged to someone else. Each step now carried her farther from that girl. At the porch edge she paused. The cabin, her whole world, looked smaller from out here. Meaner, like a wound the earth never healed. She turned away and didn't look back. The dirt road stretched pale and dusty into growing light. She'd walked it before, but only to the creek or the wood line, never past the bend, where pines and scrub closed like a gate. Every step burned her side, but she kept going. The sun climbed. The land warmed to gold and rust. Still she walked. When pain spiked hard, she leaned on a fence post or a rock, counting breaths until the world steadied enough for a few more yards. Beauty lived out there, rolling hills, whispering trees, but her world had narrowed to dust underfoot and the rhythm of one foot, then the other. By midday, the sun was a branding iron on her shoulders. Her torn dress clung with sweat. It kept no promises and offered no shade. Bare soles, soft from shoes, long gone to pieces, split and bled on the road. She stumbled more, now catching herself on stones, dropping to her knees when pain swallowed balance. Getting up took longer each time. Still, she moved. Something stronger than sense pushed her on. Fear helped. Every distant snap a bird, a branch iced her veins. Was it Jeremiah? Awake and hunting what he believed was his? He'd come, sooner or later. She knew him. He would not let go. Power was the one thing he still owned. Late afternoon found her slumped against a sun-warmed boulder, heat soaking her aching spine. Her water was gone hours ago. Her throat felt lined with dust. The land grew wilder, fewer fences, fewer scars of people trying to wrestle life from stingy soil. Maybe this was how it ended, she thought. A quiet end beside a lonely road. There were worse fates. At least the sky was bigger here. At least Jeremiah's hands couldn't reach this far. Then hoofbeats. At first she thought it was her heart, loud and ragged, but the sound sharpened. A horse, fast, closing. Clara tried to stand, tried to run. Her body refused. She dragged herself a few feet into the sparse shadow of a stunted pine and went still small as she could make herself. The hoofbeats slowed. Stopped. Easy there, Ranger. Easy now. A man's voice low, steady to his horse. Boots hit packed earth. He approached. Miss. Gentle word, careful tone. She didn't trust gentle not anymore. Gentle could turn sharp in a blink. Miss, are you hurt? Closer. Now she could hear his breath. Smell, leather, horse, and something clean soap maybe. I'm not going to hurt you. They all said that. Still, something in his voice made her open her eyes. He crouched a few feet away, not crowding concern plain in dark eyes. Big man, broad-shouldered, weathered by sun and wind, moving careful like a person nears a spooked animal. You're a long way from anywhere, he said, no judgment. Only weary kindness she barely remembered the sound of. She tried to speak. My ribs are already broken. His gaze changed, a cloud passing over deep water. He didn't lunge, didn't reach. He settled back on his heels, giving her air. "I can see that," he said. Quiet, no pity, only fact. "How long you been walking?" "Since dawn." Time felt strange under that huge sky hours, bleeding together like watercolors in rain. He took in the torn dress, the sunburn, the careful way she held herself against pain. Older than she'd first thought, mid-30s lines at the eyes from years squinting into light. Clothes good, but worn. Leather vest soft with use. "My name's Thomas," he said. "Thomas Garrett. And you don't have to tell me yours if you'd rather not." The simple choice nearly undid her. "Clara." She whispered the name, tasting new, like giving it back to herself. "Clara," he repeated, careful, testing its shape. "That's a good name. A strong name." She wanted to laugh or cry. Strong. She felt like cracked glass held with spit and prayer. He must have read that thought on her face. His voice went gentler still. "You're hurt bad more than just the ribs." He waited, patient as stone. "Someone did this," he said at last. "Someone you trusted to keep you safe." Truth hit hard. She nodded before she could stop herself. "They coming after you?" She tried to warn him about Jeremiah, about the way rage sharpened him, but only a broken sound came out. Thomas nodded like he understood anyway. "Then we best get you somewhere safe." He stood slow, hands empty, movements telegraphed. "I got a place not far. Cabin in the woods, a person can rest there without worry. You willing to trust me that far?" Trust, a language she didn't know anymore. Safety had always been the calm before the storm. But lying in dust with the sun hammering and breath sawing through broken bone, she had no choices left. "I can't." The truth was too big to say. She couldn't walk, couldn't run, could barely stand. "I know," Thomas said, and somehow he did. "That's all right. I've got a good horse and steady hands. Won't hurt you worse than you are." The sorrel gelding waited nearby, bright eyes, quiet breath. Not a brute's horse. Horses knew people. This one stood calm as Sunday morning. Thomas came, closer like she might bolt. "Going to help you up now," he said, waiting for her tiny nod before he reached. His hands were calloused and careful. He lifted her like something precious that might crack. Fire shot through her ribs. She swallowed the sound. "Easy now," he murmured, speaking to her like to his horse, patient as rain. Almost there. The saddle was sun-warmed leather, softer than anything she'd felt in years. He settled her against the horn and swung up behind with the grace of a man born in a saddle. His arms came around loose, careful taking the reins without crowding her. "Lean back if you need," he said. "Won't think less of you." She tried to hold herself upright. Pride, stubbornness, but pain throbbed like a living thing. At last, she let herself rest against him, and tension she'd carried for years eased, just a little. The horse moved smooth as water. Thomas turned off the main road onto a shaded track threading pine and aspen. Cool air, soft light. Clara let the rhythm of hoof and breath carry her away from the worst of it. "Almost there," he said after minutes that felt like hours. "Just around the bend." A small log cabin opened in a clearing. Tall pines whispered. A thin chimney exhaled pale smoke. A neat garden. A well with a waiting bucket. It looked like the sort of place she used to dream before she learned some dreams get punished. "It's not much," Thomas said, and there was doubt in his voice. "But it's solid, warm, safe. Safe impossible as flying, yet staring at the tidy rows and steady smoke. She wanted to believe. Thomas dismounted first, then helped her down. The earth felt strange, solid, unreal. She swayed while he led the horse to a corral, talking to the animal in that same gentle way. "Come on," he said, returning to her side. "Let's get you inside before you fall." The door stood open. Warm lamplight spilled into dusk. Clara looked at it and felt a small, bright thing, hope fragile as glass, but alive. For the first time in longer than she could measure, she took a step toward something instead of away, toward warmth and light, and the thin possibility that the world might hold more kindness than cruelty. "My ribs are already broken," she whispered again, and now the words held different weight. Not just damage, but the idea that broken could be mended with time and gentle hands and a place to heal. She woke later to fire crackling, a sound so foreign she thought it a dream. Pine smoke in the air. Something cooking beans? Stew? Real food, not thin gruel and hard tack. She lay still and took stock. Soft wool blanket, not burlap. A real bed, not a splintered floor. Pain dulled under warmth that seeped into her bones. The cabin was larger than it seemed outside one big room, a stone fireplace throwing shadows. Shelves lined with books more than she'd seen in a lifetime. A sturdy table worn smooth by years of use. A place made into a home, not just shelter. "You're awake," Thomas said from the hearth. He stirred a black pot over the flames. He didn't crowd, didn't fuss, just marked the fact of her waking like sunrise. "How long?" Her voice rasped like bark. Her throat was desert dry. "2 days," he said, ladling stew into a wooden bowl. "You were in a bad way. Fever broke yesterday evening." She remembered almost nothing after crossing his threshold, only scraps. Cool water at her lips, damp cloth on her forehead, a voice reading when the dark dreams hunted close. He brought the bowl, sat in a chair by the bed. Steam curled up, her stomach clenched with fierce, childish hunger. "Rabbit stew," he said. "Nothing fancy, but it'll put strength back." He offered bowl and spoon, paused when she didn't reach. "Want to sit up? Might be easier." The question cracked, something tender inside her. When had anyone last asked what might help her? She nodded. He eased her upright on stacked pillows, professional, careful, like he'd done this before. The first spoonful almost made her weep. Herbs, vegetables, meat cooked for care, not scraps tossed like to a barn cat. She ate slow, trying to make kindness last. "Easy," Thomas said when she sped up. "Been a while since a proper meal. Don't make yourself sick." He set the pot where she could see it. "There's more when you're ready. No rush." Silence settled warm as a quilt. He tended the fire, checked something baking in a Dutch oven. She watched his easy economy, a man at peace with solitude, who hadn't forgotten how to care for others. Why these changes for this block? Kept meaning. Structure. Escape road. Ordeal, fear of pursuit, collapse, meeting Thomas, careful rescue, arrival, safe cabin, first recovery. Clarity and grammar fixes. Resolved typos. Batats, hoofbeats, grill gruel. Standardized capitalization. Tightened punctuation. And smoothed sentence flow. Simple, human language. Short, clear sentences. Vivid but accessible imagery. Avoided awkward idioms you flagged. Dramatic, scandalous flair. Clean, heightened tension and emotional stakes with sharp verbs and dramatic punctuation. M-dashes. Clipped beats, while keeping content safe and profanity-free. Consistency. Maintain tone, voice, and recurring motif. My ribs are already broken. Length. Added lean, sensory details to keep viewers hooked without changing events or adding new plot. Why? The word slipped out of Clara before she could stop it. Thin and shaky, like smoke rising in the quiet room. Thomas glanced up from the bread he was checking. "Why, what? Why? Help me?" Her voice cracked under the weight of shame. "You don't know me. Don't know what I might have done. Or what kind of trouble might follow me here." Thomas didn't answer right. Away. He leaned back in his chair, staring into the fire like it held the right words. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady. "Had a sister once," he said. "Sarah. Married young to a man who seemed decent enough. Brought flowers, smiled polite, said all the right things." Clara's stomach knotted. She already felt the shape of this story, and it was a shape she knew too well. "After the wedding," Thomas continued, "the mask came off. Sarah started visiting with bruises she tried to hide, stories that didn't add up." His hands curled tight, then loosened again. "She'd tell us everything was fine, that we didn't understand. And then one day, she just stopped coming." He rose, crossed to the window. The dark outside pressed close, trees whispering secrets she couldn't hear. "When I finally went to check on her," his voice went quiet, raw. "Found her in the barn. Neck broke. Her husband said she'd fallen when a horse spooked. Clara's breath hitched. She whispered, "I'm sorry." Thomas's eyes stayed on the night. That horse was gentle as a lamb. Never spooked a day in its life. But no one wanted to call a grieving widower a liar. No one wanted to ask questions. When he turned back, Clara saw the same haunted weight she carried in herself. Guilt for not acting sooner. For loving someone you couldn't save. "So now," he said, voice rough but steady, "when I see someone hurt like you were, I don't ask questions. I don't care what they might have done to deserve it. I just help. Because maybe this time, I can make a difference." The honesty in his words cracked something inside her. This wasn't pity. It wasn't false kindness meant to bind her in debt. It was shared grief, spoken plain. "I didn't do anything," Clara whispered. "I wasn't perfect. But I tried to be good. Tried to keep the peace." "I know," Thomas said. His certainty made tears sting. "Oh, her eyes. It's not about what you did. Some people just carry hurt inside them and spread it around because they don't know any other way to live." Clara swallowed a sob. She'd spent years wondering what she'd done wrong. To hear it wasn't her fault felt like water to a soul dying of thirst. "Your brother," she managed. "The one who hurt you." Thomas's jaw clenched. His voice dropped. "How do you know it was my brother?" "The way you knew," Clara said softly. "Some kinds of pain you only recognize because you've lived it." Silence stretched between them, filled with the crackle of fire and the whisper of wind through the pines. Two survivors, bound by shared scars. "Jeremiah," Clara said at last, speaking the name like a curse. "My brother's name is Jeremiah." The syllables burned her tongue. "He wasn't always like this. It started after our parents died. He said he wanted to protect me. Said the world was too hard for someone like me." "And you believed him?" Thomas's gaze was sharp but not unkind. "Yes. He was all I had left. And the world is hard. But he was wrong about me. Wrong about what kind of heart I could bear." Understanding flickered in Thomas's dark eyes. No more words were needed. They'd both learned that sometimes family is where love grows or where it goes to die. "He'll come looking," Clara said, voicing the fear gnawing at her since the fever broke. "He won't let me go without a fight." "Let him come," Thomas said. His voice was hard as a blade. "This is my land, my home. You're under my protection now." Protection. Another dangerous word. Clara wanted to believe it, even as fear whispered otherwise. For the first time in years, she closed her eyes without counting footsteps in the dark, without waiting for pain to wake her. 3 weeks passed like water through open hands each day, blending into the next. Clara woke to sunlight through clean windows instead of angry shouts. She ate meals that filled her belly instead of scraps thrown like feed. She spoke when she wanted, fell silent when words weighed too much. Thomas never demanded explanations. Her ribs healed slowly, though they still caught her breath when she moved wrong. Her hands stopped trembling. Hollow cheeks softened with food and sleep. But the deepest healing was harder to see happening in moments so small she almost missed them. The first time she laughed at something, Thomas said. The first morning she woke without listening for danger. The first evening she didn't flinch when he moved too quickly. Autumn painted the world in gold and rust. One night, Clara sat by the fire while Thomas read aloud by lamplight. He handled books like treasures, turning pages slow, sometimes reading passages he thought she'd enjoy. Tonight's reading was Whitman words about open roads and choosing your path. "Were you a teacher?" Clara asked suddenly, surprising herself. Thomas looked up, firelight warm on his weathered face. "What makes you ask that?" "The way you read. You've got more learning than most folks this far out." He considered her words, then gave a small, wry smile. "Studied to be one. Back east, in Philadelphia. Thought I'd help civilize the frontier through education." His smile faded. Turns out, the frontier had other ideas about civilization. Clara waited, sensing there was more. Thomas always gave pieces of himself slowly, like offerings she didn't have to return unless she chose. "Came out here with my wife, Margaret," he said, closing the book but keeping a finger in the pages. She was the real teacher. Had a gift for it. We were going to start a school, build something that could grow into more. His voice went soft, thick with memory. Clara had noticed there were no signs of a woman in the cabin. She'd wondered but never asked. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Fever took her. Second winter we were here. She nursed half the territory through it. Wouldn't stop, even when she got sick herself." His shoulders bowed under invisible weight. "Always said if you had skills to help, you had an obligation to use them." Clara's throat tightened. She knew that kind of loss, different shape, same ache. "I'm sorry," she whispered. 5 years ago now, Thomas said. "Long enough, the edges are worn smooth." "Not so long, I've forgotten why I loved her." He opened the book again, smoothing pages with care. "These were hers. She made me promise to keep reading. Said knowledge is the one thing nobody can take once it's yours." Clara let the words sink deep. Jeremiah had never allowed books, never allowed her to think beyond chores and survival. The idea that learning could belong to her felt revolutionary. Why these changes? Flow of trauma to healing. This section bridges Clara's physical healing with emotional growth, and Thomas's backstory. Deepened emotional beats. I added slight expansions to emphasize shared pain, giving more room for Thomas's sister story and Margaret's memory to resonate. Corrected grammar and clarity. Fixed tense inconsistencies and typos while keeping everything simple and readable. Scandalous tension. Jeremiah's threat grows in the background while Clara begins to imagine a future setting up high stakes. Maintained structure and key quotes. Kept vital lines like, "My ribs are already broken," and important names and exchanges. Language accessibility. Short, punchy sentences, easy for audiences to follow, yet layered with emotion. "I can't read," Clara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, like confessing a sin. "I know my letters some," she added quickly. "Can sound out simple words, but real reading like you do I never had the chance to learn." Thomas didn't laugh or frown. His dark eyes softened with something close to surprise, but not judgment. "Would you like to?" he asked carefully. "I mean really learn. To read for the joy of it, not just to get by." The offer struck Clara like a physical blow. Reading wasn't just about words on paper, it was about understanding a secret world, one she'd always been shut out from. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe. Jeremiah had kept her ignorant on purpose, her world no bigger than the cabin walls and his rules. "I'd like that," she said, the words trembling like a prayer. They began that very night. Thomas dragged his chair close so they could share the lamplight, opening a small, simple book, a story about a girl who lived in a magical garden. He read the first lines, his voice slow and deliberate, pointing to each word as he spoke. Then he passed the book to Clara. She stumbled over the syllables. Her tongue felt clumsy, the letters strange and stubborn. But Thomas was patient as stone, never showing a hint of frustration. When she misread, he gently corrected her, his voice calm, steady. He made her feel safe to try again, safe to fail. It became their evening ritual. After supper, when the day's work was done, they sat by the fire, she reading aloud, he listening or mending gear while she practiced. Some nights, she managed whole paragraphs without help. Other nights, the letters blurred together and her frustration boiled over. Thomas never scolded her. He just poured more coffee and suggested a different story, as if patience itself was another kind of lesson. Nearly a month after she'd arrived, Clara found herself speaking of Jeremiah. Not the worst horrors, not yet, but the small hurts that had stacked like stones over the years. "He wasn't always like that," she said softly, tracing a finger over a line of text. "When Ma died, I couldn't sleep. Jeremiah used to tell me stories, tales he made up, about brave girls who saved kingdoms." Her mouth twisted. Funny, looking back. Thomas didn't interrupt. He let her spill the words at her own pace, his silence a steady, gentle invitation. "Pa worked us hard, but he was fair," Clara continued. "When he passed, Jeremiah tried to step into his shoes, but he was only 19. Scared, though he'd never admit it." She flipped a page, though she wasn't really reading now. "The first time he hit me, it was 6 months after Pa died. I'd burned supper. Nothing major, but he was wound tight, and he just..." She smacked her palm lightly, remembering the sting. He looked as shocked as I felt. She whispered. He apologized after. Said it would never happen again. Said he'd been tired, worried. Thomas's voice was quiet. But it did happen again. Yes. Her eyes stung. Not right away. Sometimes months passed where things felt almost normal. He'd be my brother again. We'd fix fences together, laugh, read stories. Her throat closed. Then something would snap. Bad harvest, money trouble, sometimes just the wind blowing wrong. Clara closed the book. Unable to keep pretending she was reading, I kept thinking, if I could just be better, more helpful, less trouble, maybe he'd stop. Tears filled her eyes. It took me years to realize it wasn't about me at all. It was about him needing someone smaller to hurt when the world felt too big. Thomas stared into the fire, voice rough with his own memories. My brother Caleb was like that. Mean drunk, mean sober, always stronger, always taking. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a jagged white scar from wrist to elbow. Got this when I was 16, trying to stop him from tearing the house apart after losing our last horse in a card game. Clara's breath caught. You left too. Thomas nodded. Soon as I turned 18 and could claim my inheritance, I left and never looked back. His face hardened. 2 years later, Caleb found me in Denver. Demanded I come home to help save the family farm. What did you do? Clara asked. Told him the farm could rot for all I cared. Told him if he ever came near me again, I'd kill him. His voice was flat as stone. The words sent a shiver through Clara. He meant them. Even now, he meant them. Silence stretched. Clara's chest loosened. Shame and guilt unraveling like old rope. You think I'm a coward? She asked softly. For staying so long? No. Thomas's answer was immediate. Absolute. I think you survived the only way you knew. You held on longer than most could. And when you finally ran, you did it with broken ribs, bare feet, and nowhere to go. His voice softened. That makes you braver than anyone I've ever met. Clara broke then. Not with the bitter tears she'd cried so often before, but with a release so clean it felt like a baptism. Thomas didn't hush her or tell her to stop. He simply sat, steady as a mountain, while she wept for the girl she'd been and the years she'd lost. When her sobs finally faded, he offered a handkerchief and quietly made fresh coffee, giving her space to breathe. My ribs are already broken, she said softly when he returned, repeating the words that had become her refrain. But maybe that just means they can heal stronger. Thomas smiled, his first real, unguarded smile. Warmth bloomed in Clara's chest like spring after endless winter. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was more than survival. A future where broken things could truly grow back stronger. Why these changes? Jeremiah's backstory revealed slowly. Built Clara's memories carefully, layering abuse with moments of false tenderness to show her conflicted loyalty. Thomas's past parallels. Clara's strengthened their bond and mirrored trauma, raising emotional stakes. Grammar and flow fixes. Simplified structure. Fixed tense errors. Removed clunky phrasing. Dramatic pacing. Added pauses and clipped sentences for intensity during emotional revelations. Visual focus. Used clear sensory images without overcomplication. Consistent motifs. Preserved key line. My ribs are already broken to keep narrative grounded. Scandalous tension. Heightened the darkness of Jeremiah's cruelty while keeping it clean and non-explicit. The first sign of trouble came on a crisp November morning. Thomas returned from checking snares, his face hard and pale like winter stone. Clara looked up from the book she was reading. She could manage most of Whitman's poetry now, but the sight of his expression made her stomach drop. What is it? She asked, her voice tight. Part of her already knew. Peace never lasted. Thomas set down his rabbits and went to the window, scanning the tree line with sharp, wary eyes. Someone's been asking questions in town, he said at last. A man matching Jeremiah's description. Looking for a woman who passed through. Offered money for information. Clara's hands went cold around the book. Her heart pounded like a drumbeat of doom. She'd always known this day would come. Deep down, she'd felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon. But some small part of her had dared to hope. Maybe he'd given up. "How much money?" she asked, voice barely steady. Thomas turned, surprised. "Does it matter?" "It might." Clara set the book aside with trembling fingers. "Jeremiah's got a silver tongue when he wants to use it. Folks around here don't have much. If he's offering enough, someone will talk." Thomas was quiet, considering. Ben Morrison at the general store seemed too interested. Asked a lot of questions about whether this woman was dangerous, if there was a reward involved. Clara felt the walls of the cabin press in. The safety she'd grown to love suddenly, and seemed fragile like spun glass ready to shatter. Ben Morrison would sell his own mother for the right price. Jeremiah wouldn't even have to try hard. "What did you tell him?" she asked sharply. "Nothing. But I could see him thinking. Knows I don't usually have visitors. Knows I've been buying supplies for 2 instead of 1. Thomas crossed the room, his movements calm but deliberate. He began checking his rifle with a soldier's care, each motion slow, precise, final. "We've got maybe a day," he said grimly. 2 at most before someone decides Jeremiah's coin is worth more than minding their own business. Clara's heart squeezed painfully. "You should leave," she whispered. "Take what you need and go. I won't be the reason you lose your home." Thomas looked up sharply, his expression softening just a fraction. "This is my land, Clara, my home, and I don't run from bullies, especially ones who hurt women." "You don't understand what he's like," Clara said, pacing like a trapped animal. "When Jeremiah's cornered, he won't fight fair. He'll bring men with him, men who'll do anything for money. Then we'll be ready." The certainty in Thomas's voice froze Clara mid-step. She stared at him, really saw him. The way his hands moved over the rifle, with easy familiarity. The scar on his left hand, sharp white against tanned skin. The calm confidence of a man who'd seen violence before. "You were a soldier," she said. "It wasn't a question." 2 years in the cavalry, Thomas confirmed. Chasing raiders across half of Texas. Learned which men you could count on when the bullets started flying. Relief and terror warred inside Clara. Relief that he understood what they were facing. Terror that even his skills might not be enough to stop Jeremiah's fury. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Thomas showed Clara how to load and fire his spare pistol, how to breathe, aim, and squeeze the trigger steady. Her hands shook at first. Memories of Jeremiah's hunting lessons came flooding back, but she forced herself to focus. "Don't think of it as shooting a person," Thomas said calmly. "Think of it as protecting yourself, protecting your future." By sunset, the clearing glowed gold and crimson. Thomas stationed himself at the front window, while Clara crouched at the back. The waiting was the worst part. Each creak of wood, each whisper of wind felt like an omen. "Maybe I was wrong," Clara whispered near midnight, exhaustion dragging at her. "Maybe he won't come tonight." "He'll come," Thomas replied with deadly certainty. "Men like Jeremiah, they don't give up. He's had months to work himself up for this. Months to convince himself you belong to him." Clara's stomach twisted. She opened her mouth to respond, then froze. In the distance, faint but growing, the sound of horses moving through the trees. Slow, deliberate, trying to be quiet, but not quiet enough. Thomas heard it too. His body went still, sharp as a hunting cat, ready to strike. "How many?" Clara breathed. Thomas tilted his head, listening. 3, maybe 4. Coming from the north. Clara's fear surged like wildfire. Her ribs ached with the pounding of her heart. But beneath the terror was something new. A hard, sharp edge of defiance. She wasn't the same broken girl who'd fled barefoot and bleeding months ago. She had learned. She had grown. And tonight, she would fight. The horses stopped at the edge of the clearing. Clara held her breath, listening to the low rumble of men's voices conferring in the dark. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling like predators. "Clara!" Jeremiah's voice cut through the night like a blade. Loud, commanding, the same tone that had once frozen her in place as a child. "I know you're in there," he shouted. "Come out now and we can settle this peaceful like." Thomas glanced at her, eyebrows raised in a silent question. Clara shook her head sharply. There would be no peaceful settling. Not tonight. Not ever. You've got no right to keep her. Jeremiah's voice moved as he circled, fury sharpening his words. She's family. She belongs with me. She belongs to herself, Thomas called back, voice steady and strong. And she's chosen to stay here. The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. Clara pictured Jeremiah's face twisting with rage at being defied. You don't know what you're dealing with. Jeremiah's voice dropped cold, almost a hiss. That girl's sick in the head. She lies. She causes trouble wherever she goes. I'm trying to save you from her. The words struck Clara like physical blows. The same lies he'd always used to turn others against her. Only mistake I see, Thomas replied, calm as a mountain, is you not turning around and riding away. Jeremiah laughed, a harsh, broken sound that made Clara's stomach twist. You think you're some kind of hero? He sneered. Taking in strays? Let me tell you about that girl. She's nothing but trouble wrapped in a pretty package. She'll chew you up and leave you with nothing but pain. Clara's hands clenched around her pistol. His words slithered into her ears, echoing old fears, but this time, they didn't stick. Thomas's voice cut through the dark, quiet, and meant only for her. You know who you are. Don't let him take that from you. Clara opened her eyes, met his steady gaze. A calmness settled over her, fierce and sure. I see movement, Thomas murmured, eyes narrowing. 2 men, by the woodshed, trying to circle around back. Clara gripped her pistol tighter, the metal warming under her palm. Last chance, Clara, Jeremiah roared. Come out now, or I'll come in and drag you out myself. Clara looked at me. Thomas. His question was silent but clear. Your choice. She drew a deep, shaky breath. Then she stood. I'm not going anywhere with you, Jeremiah, she shouted through the open window. Her voice rang strong and defiant. I'm done running, done hiding, done letting you decide what my life looks like. The clearing went still. A terrible, electric stillness. Then Jeremiah roared, pure fury. You ungrateful wretch. I gave you everything, kept you fed, kept you safe. You kept me prisoner. Clara screamed back. Years of pain and rage tore free like wildfire. You beat me down every chance you got, made me grateful for scraps. The world would have eaten you alive without me. Jeremiah's voice cracked under his rage. The only thing I ever needed protection from was you. Clara's words rang out like a church bell, final and undeniable. Something broke inside her then. The last chain snapping. Thomas's hand squeezed her shoulder, pride burning in his dark eyes. Get ready, he whispered. They're coming. The attack came, fast, boots pounding, shouts splitting the night as Jeremiah's men charged from 3 sides. Gunfire erupted. Bright flashes split the darkness, followed by the sharp crack of rifles. Clara dropped to her knees behind the window frame, returning fire with steady hands that surprised even her. Thomas's rifle roared from the front of the cabin, precise, deadly. A man screamed. Another cursed and fell back. The smell of gunpowder thickened the air. Stay low, Thomas barked, reloading without taking his eyes from the chaos outside. Clara's ears rang, her breath sharp and fast. Through the smoke, she saw shadows darting between trees. My ribs are already broken, she whispered, steadying her hands. But my spirit isn't. She aimed at a moving shadow and fired. A cry of pain answered her shot. The fight was quick, but brutal. In minutes, 2 of Jeremiah's men were down, and the rest broke and ran, their retreating hoofbeats fading into the distance. The sudden silence was deafening. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Stay down, Thomas said, scanning the trees with narrowed eyes. It's not over yet. Clara crouched, heart hammering, pistol clutched tight. The cabin smelled of smoke and fear. Through the shattered window, she shouted into the night. Jeremiah, stop hiding. Show yourself. Her taunt cut the stillness like a blade. She knew him too well. Knew his pride wouldn't let the insult stand. You think you're smart now, don't you? Jeremiah's voice came rough from the tree line. Got yourself a man with a gun and you think that makes you safe? Clara's voice was steady. Safer than I ever was with you. I never hurt you. Jeremiah roared. Clara's laugh was harsh and bitter. You broke my ribs because I burned supper. Because I existed in a way you didn't like. Don't you dare rewrite what you did. You're remembering it wrong. Jeremiah's voice shook, not with guilt, but with rage at losing control. I remember everything, Clara screamed. Every blow, every word, every time you made me feel like nothing. The silence that followed was heavy final, like the air before a storm breaks. Come out here, Clara. Jeremiah's voice rang cold, sharp with rage. Face me like family. Clara straightened slowly, shoulders square. No more settling, she shouted back, her voice cutting through the darkness. No more pretending you were protecting me when all you wanted was someone to hurt when the world didn't bend to your will. Branches cracked under his boots as he circled the cabin, hunting for weakness. Thomas kept his rifle aimed at the shadows, his posture tense. His gaze flicked toward Clara, filled with worry and something fiercer determination. You always were ungrateful, Jeremiah's words hissed like venom. Always thought you deserved better than what you had. Ma spoiled you, filled your head with nonsense about being special. Ma loved me. Clara's voice was like a shield, ringing strong and clear. She saw my worth, the worth you tried to beat out of me. She only saw what she wanted to see, Jeremiah snarled. Just like this fool you've taken up with. He moved closer. Clara heard the creak of leather, the soft scrape of his boots on the earth. You think he loves you? Jeremiah sneered. Think anyone could love something as broken as you? The words hit like old blows. But they didn't land the same way anymore. Clara had armor now, the patient care Thomas had given her, the belief she'd built brick by brick inside herself. Maybe he does, Clara said simply. Maybe I'm worth loving after all. Jeremiah's laugh was harsh, wild. You're worth nothing. You're broken. Clara, broken in ways no one can fix. And you know it. Clara looked at Thomas. His steady gaze, filled with pride and love, anchored her. You broke my ribs, she said, voice rising like a storm. You broke my spirit. You tried to break my will, but you didn't break me. She stepped fully into the window frame, silhouetted in moonlight, daring him to take the shot. I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm done being afraid of you. The night went deathly still. You little witch. Jeremiah spat, his voice dripping with venom. Ungrateful, worthless little witch. That's enough. Thomas's voice sliced through the darkness like a blade. He stepped into the doorway, rifle leveled. In that moment, Clara saw the soldier in him, the man forged by war, unshakable and deadly. You've said your piece, Thomas called out, cold and calm. Now leave. Take your men and go. This is your last chance. Jeremiah's laugh was jagged, broken. You think you can take what's mine? Think you can steal my sister without paying the price? She was never yours to own, Thomas said firmly. She's a grown woman, free to choose her own path. Thomas took one step forward, his shadow stretching long in the moonlight. And if you can't respect that choice, we have nothing more to talk about. Clara heard movement, a soft scrape of boot on stone. Jeremiah was shifting, hunting for a shot. Thomas, she hissed urgently. He's moving. But Thomas had already seen it. His stance shifted, rifle tracking toward the motion. I see him, he murmured, eyes sharp. Last chance, Jeremiah, Thomas shouted. Walk away now while you still can. I ain't walking away from nothing, Jeremiah bellowed. His voice was pure fire and hate. She belongs to me. No, Clara said, her voice carrying clear and bright across the clearing. I belong to myself. Always have. And I choose to stay with a man who treats me like I matter. The words struck like lightning. A muzzle flash flared in the darkness. Jeremiah fired first, not at Thomas, but at Clara, his final act of spite. Thomas's rifle boomed a split second later. Jeremiah screamed, stumbling back into the trees. His gun clattered to the ground. The other men fled, their hoofbeats pounding away into the distance. Clara! Thomas rushed to her side, hands gentle but urgent as they checked her for wounds. I'm all right, she gasped, trembling. He missed. I'm all right. Thomas's gaze swept the clearing. He's wounded, badly, but alive. Clara's breath caught. What do we do? Thomas's face was unreadable. That's your choice. Clara's hands trembled as she lowered her pistol. Memories of Jeremiah's cruelty surged every bruise, every broken bone, every tear. But she thought of something else, too. Who she wanted to be. Help him, she said finally, voice and steady. Tend his wounds, give him water, and then send him away. Thomas nodded, quiet respect in his eyes. You sure? Yes. Clara lifted her chin. I won't let him turn me into something cruel. I won't let him take that from me, too. They found Jeremiah near the tree line, clutching his shoulder, blood soaking his shirt. His eyes burned with hate and something that might have been fear. You should have killed me, he spat as Thomas bound the wound. Should have finished it. Probably, Thomas said calmly. But Clara's kinder than either of us deserve. Clara knelt beside her brother, meeting his glare. Up close, he seemed smaller, diminished, a man hollowed out by rage and drink. This is the last time, she said quietly. The last time you'll ever have power over me. Do you understand? Jeremiah's lip curled. This ain't over. Yes, Clara said with absolute certainty. It is. With Thomas's help, Jeremiah mounted his horse, swaying with weakness but refusing to show it. There's a doctor in Cedar Falls, Thomas said. 20 miles north. Ride hard and you might make it. Jeremiah glared down at Clara one last time. For a heartbeat, something like regret flickered in his eyes. Then his face hardened, and he spat his final warning. You'll regret this. Both of you. Mark my words. Clara stood tall beside Thomas, unflinching. No, she said. I won't. Jeremiah wheeled his horse and rode into the night, his shadow swallowed by the dark. Clara listened to the fading hoofbeats until the only sound left was the whisper of the wind through the trees. The clearing was silent, save for Clara's heartbeat pounding in her ears. Thomas lowered his rifle slowly. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion, but his eyes stayed sharp as they swept the trees for any lingering threat. When he finally turned to her, Clara felt the weight of the night fall away. It was over. Truly, finally over. Thomas's gaze softened. Think he'll come back? Clara listened to the forest, to the fading echo of hoofbeats swallowed by darkness. No, she said at last, voice steady. He's done with me. For good. Thomas nodded, then surveyed the damage to his cabin. Bullet holes scarred the walls. Windows shattered. Blood stained the steps. Clara's chest tightened with guilt. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry he brought this to your home. Thomas reached for her hand, strong and reassuring. Our home, he corrected gently. He squeezed her fingers. Wood and glass can be fixed. What matters is we're alive. Together. Our home, Clara repeated softly, tasting the words like something sweet and new. The truth of it settled deep in her chest, blooming like wildflowers after a hard winter. My ribs are already broken, she murmured one last time. But now, the words felt empty of pain. Just scars, just old damage, no longer defining her. Thomas understood without asking. But your heart isn't, he said quietly. Your heart's whole. Clara looked at him in the pale moonlight. The man who had given her space to heal, who had shown her a world beyond fear. Yes, she whispered, it's mine again. Spring came early that year, painting the mountain meadows in new shades of green Clara had never seen before. She stood on the freshly repaired porch, watching Thomas work in the garden they'd expanded together. The cabin no longer bore signs of battle. The bullet holes were patched, the windows replaced, letting in more light than before, as if the violence had been absorbed and transformed into strength. 6 months had passed since Jeremiah rode away into the night, bleeding and defeated. In that time, Clara learned to count seasons instead of bruises. Days were no longer marked by fear, but by planting and harvest, sunrise and laughter. The tomatoes are coming along nicely, Thomas said, wiping soil from his hands with an easy smile. Clara's heart warmed at his casual mention of the future, a future she now believed in. I was thinking, she said, smoothing her skirt, one she had sewn herself. Maybe we could plant flowers along the path, make it welcoming for visitors. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Expecting company? Maybe. Clara hesitated, then gathered her courage. I've been thinking about writing to the school board in Cedar Falls. They need a teacher. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Thomas came to sit beside her, close enough she could feel his warmth. You want to teach? I want to help children learn to read the way you helped me. Her voice trembled with emotion. Books can open doors, even for kids trapped in cages they don't see yet. Thomas was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Margaret used to say teaching was about more than reading and numbers. It was about giving people choices. Clara leaned against his shoulder, comforted by his strength. They could speak of Margaret now, without sorrow shadowing his face. The position comes with a small house, Clara continued softly. Big enough for a family. If... She trailed off, shy suddenly. Thomas turned to her, his eyes dark and tender. If... What? If a certain former soldier might consider sharing it, Clara said, voice trembling but brave. For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then, Thomas's face broke into a slow, radiant smile. Clara Hartwell, he said, using the name she'd chosen for herself. Are you asking me to marry you? Clara's breath caught. I suppose I am, she said with a nervous laugh. Thomas didn't hesitate. He kissed her a kiss full of promise and new beginnings. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to ask you for months, he murmured. But I waited until you were ready to hear it. I'm ready, Clara said. And this time she knew it was true. They planned to wed in summer, when wildflowers would bloom and the world would feel alive. Clara would take the teaching position. Thomas would find work in town carpentry. Maybe and they would keep the cabin for weekends. A place of peace. One afternoon, as they sorted through books to take into town, Clara paused over a well-worn volume of Whitman. Listen to this, she said, reading aloud. Henceforth I ask not good fortune. I myself am good fortune. Henceforth I whimper no more. Postpone no more. Need nothing. Thomas smiled. That's your poem. Your truth. Clara held the book to her chest. I used to think my broken ribs defined me, she said softly. But they were just something that happened. Something I survived. She caught her reflection in the window, a woman standing tall, clear-eyed, no longer shrinking from the world. Thomas came up behind her, his hands warm on her shoulders. You look like yourself, he said. The person you were always meant to be. Clara turned and kissed him, sealing her promise to the future. That night, by the fire, she finally spoke of the moment she'd lain on Jeremiah's cabin floor, ready to give up. I thought I was too damaged to be saved, she admitted. But I wasn't. I was ready to heal. I just needed a safe place to do it. Thomas took her hand, lifting it to his lips. We saved each other, he said. That's what love does. Clara smiled, tears shining like jewels. My ribs are already broken, she whispered, but now the words were full of hope, not despair. Her heart was whole, strong, and finally hers. Outside, the spring wind whispered through the pines like a blessing. The cabin glowed warm and golden, filled with laughter, books, and the promise of all the tomorrows to come.